They look like they're getting a little bit more fired up. What was that? Is that a shark?
In the depths of the ocean, something unimaginable occurred. A massive predator, known as the great white shark, the ocean's most feared hunter, was swallowed whole by another creature. No struggle, no trace. Only the chilling data from a tracking device left behind, revealing a sudden temperature rise and a deep dive into the abyss. What could challenge the great white's dominance so completely?
It's a rare sight, a giant female great white shark so close you can see her sharp teeth. She's known as Deep Blue, about 20 feet long, 50 years old, and very pregnant. Off Mexico's Guadalupe Island, experts have dubbed her the biggest shark ever filmed. You see, in the world of great whites, females are larger than males. Well, he did not take the video, he watched it, noting how unique markings can help researchers identify the shark, and also observing how close she got to a human.
It all started with what seemed like just another routine study off the coast of Western Australia. Marine biologists had been tagging a healthy, 9-foot-long female great white shark as part of an ongoing predator tracking program. These tags are equipped with sensors designed to record critical data such as water temperature, depth, and movement, providing valuable insights into the shark's behavior. After a certain period, the tags detach from the shark and float to the surface, transmitting the recorded data to satellites for analysis.
He's found himself being hunted by a great white shark, and he caught it all on camera. Check it.
For the first several weeks, the shark followed a typical migration pattern along the southern coastline. This was no surprise. The great white, one of the ocean's most formidable predators, had been tagged with the hope of understanding its movements and behaviors in more detail. The data initially confirmed what scientists already knew. This was just another tagged shark going about its usual routine in the wild. However, about 4 months after the shark was tagged, something extraordinary occurred. The tracking device, which was expected to float up to the surface and provide routine data, instead washed up on a beach. When the researchers retrieved it, they were shocked by what the data revealed. The information was far from the typical readings they expected to see. There was no record of the shark's usual movements. Instead, the data indicated a sudden spike in water temperature, followed by a dramatic plunge into deep water, nearly 1,900 feet below the surface. These unusual movements raised immediate red flags for the scientists. What had happened to the shark? The temperature rise, in particular, was an anomaly. Typically, great white sharks swim in colder waters, usually around 46 degrees Fahrenheit, about 8 degrees Celsius. But the data from the tag showed a sharp increase in temperature to 78 degrees Fahrenheit, 25.5 degrees Celsius. This was far too high for the depths where the shark was swimming, and it didn't align with any typical behavior of a great white shark. The only explanation that made sense was that the shark's tracking device had been swallowed by a predator, something warm-blooded, capable of digesting the tag and generating such a temperature shift. But what predator could possibly challenge a great white shark, the ocean's most dominant apex predator? The plunge that followed the temperature spike was just as perplexing. The shark, which had been swimming along the coast, suddenly descended to nearly 1,900 feet an unusually deep dive for a great white. Marine predators like sharks are known to dive to great depths. But this kind of abrupt and rapid descent wasn't typical of scavengers or smaller fish. The movement data suggested something much larger, something capable of diving at speed and continuing to move for several days. This wasn't a free-floating tag or the result of some ordinary marine life. This was the movement of a much larger predator, one capable of swallowing a 9-foot shark whole. After several days of strange activity, the tag eventually surfaced, floating back to the shore as if nothing unusual had occurred. The shark, along with its tagging device, had seemingly vanished without a trace. For the scientists involved in the study, this wasn't just another mystery. It was a biological conundrum that challenged everything they thought they knew about the ocean's top predators. Could a shark as powerful as the great white actually be eaten by something else? And if so, what could possibly be capable of such a feat? At first, the idea of a predator capable of consuming a great white shark seemed unthinkable. The great white is widely regarded as the ultimate predator of the ocean, the king of its food chain. For years, scientists had operated under the assumption that nothing in the water could pose a significant threat to a healthy great white shark, especially one as large as the one in question. So, the question became, what could challenge the shark's dominance so completely and so quietly? As researchers began to discuss potential explanations, speculation ran wild. Some of the more fantastical ideas involved mythical sea monsters or prehistoric predators that had somehow managed to evade detection. Could there be some ancient creature lurking in the depths, a predator so large and so elusive that it had remained hidden from human observation for centuries? While these theories captured the imagination of the public, the scientists involved in the study remained grounded. They knew better than to entertain wild speculation without evidence. So, they turned their attention to more plausible biological explanations. Could it have been another great white shark? The idea of one great white preying on another was highly unusual, but not entirely impossible. Sharks, after all, are opportunistic hunters, and a larger predator could potentially ambush a smaller one if the conditions were right. Alternatively, could it have been a killer whale, an orca? Orcas are known to be one of the few animals capable of taking on a great white shark, and there have been documented instances of orcas killing sharks in the past. But the data didn't quite match with either of these potential culprits. Something about the movements, the temperature shift, and the deep dive didn't fit the behaviors known to be associated with these predators. Each theory had its flaws. No predator's behavior aligned perfectly with what the tag had recorded. Yet, something had clearly happened. A 9-foot great white shark had vanished, and the only evidence left behind was the tracking device, which had recorded its final mysterious moments. The idea of a larger predator consuming the shark was starting to look increasingly plausible, but no one could say for certain what had occurred. What was certain, however, was that this event had raised more questions than answers. The case quickly gained media attention, and public fascination exploded. After all, if something could consume a great white shark whole, what other mysteries might lurk beneath the waves, waiting to be uncovered? Researchers, backed by hard data and a growing sense of unease, began to investigate further. What they discovered next would send shockwaves through the scientific community. The discovery of the tracking device was just the beginning of what would become an unfolding mystery that would capture the attention of marine biologists and the public alike. When researchers examined the data, it became apparent that what they were dealing with was no ordinary event. The sharp rise in temperature recorded by the tag suggested that the shark had been exposed to something extraordinary, and the sudden descent into deep waters further compounded the mystery. It was clear that something had consumed the shark, but what? The scientists were left with more questions than answers, and the investigation began to take on a much deeper and more urgent tone. As they began to analyze the data in more detail, they realized that the temperature spike was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The tag had recorded a sudden and dramatic increase in temperature, from 46 degrees Fahrenheit, typical for the depths where great white sharks swim, to a scorching 78 degrees Fahrenheit. This was a temperature more commonly found in warm-blooded animals, which immediately raised the possibility that the shark had been swallowed by a predator capable of maintaining a higher body temperature. The question was, which predator could that be? Marine biologists considered the possibility that the shark had been consumed by another larger great white shark. After all, sharks are known to be opportunistic predators, and it's not unheard of for a larger shark to prey on a smaller one, particularly if food is scarce or if territorial disputes come into play. However, the data from the tag didn't fit the profile of typical shark behavior. For one thing, the descent recorded by the tag was far deeper than what one would expect from a shark scavenging for food at those depths. This was not a simple feeding pattern. The tag had recorded an abrupt dive of nearly 1,900 feet, far beyond the reach of most predators who typically hunt at shallower depths. This sharp plunge suggested that whatever had eaten the shark was capable of diving at great speeds, and it was moving with a sense of purpose and efficiency that was not consistent with a typical shark attack. In addition to the temperature spike and rapid descent, the tag continued to transmit data for several days after the event. The recorded movements of the tag were slow and deliberate, mirroring the movements of a much larger predator that was capable of diving to great depths and remaining there for an extended period of time. The tag's movements didn't fit the behavior of scavengers or smaller marine predators either. It seemed to be the actions of something far more formidable, something capable of overpowering a 9-foot shark and consuming it whole. This raised the possibility of a predator much larger than the great white shark. But what could that be? Scientists began to theorize that it might be a new, previously undocumented creature, lurking deep in the ocean and capable of consuming large predators like the great white. The idea of an unknown sea monster was an exciting theory, one that captured the public's imagination. Could there be a creature hiding in the depths, one so elusive that it had never been discovered? It was a thrilling thought, but one that lacked any tangible evidence. The possibility of a previously unknown predator prompted scientists to dig deeper into the data. They knew that if the shark had been consumed by a warm-blooded predator, the rise in temperature would not be the only clue. The tracking tag had been designed to monitor not only temperature but also depth and movement. Researchers began to examine the dive patterns in more detail, comparing the data with known movements of large marine predators. What they found was both surprising and unsettling. The movements of the tag did not match those of any known predator. It was clear that the shark had been eaten, but the nature of the predator remained a mystery. At this point, the researchers turned their attention to the most likely candidates, killer whales, or orcas. Orcas are one of the few known marine predators capable of taking down a great white shark. They are highly intelligent, highly social, and have been observed hunting in coordinated groups, targeting large prey such as seals and even whales. But could an orca have been responsible for the disappearance of the great white? The idea seemed plausible. Orcas are known to target sharks, and there have been documented cases of orcas attacking and killing great whites. In fact, the idea that orcas could be capable of overpowering a great white had gained traction in recent years, particularly after a series of high-profile incidents in which orcas were observed removing the livers of great white sharks, leaving the rest of the carcass to sink or wash ashore. The theory of orca predation gained further credibility when scientists reviewed the data from the tracking tag. The temperature spike, followed by the rapid descent into deep waters, seemed to match the behavior of orcas, who are capable of diving to impressive depths in search of prey. Orcas are also known for their ability to remove specific internal organs from their prey, a behavior that could explain the absence of a shark carcass in this case. The orcas would have consumed the most nutrient-rich parts of the shark, its liver, heart, and stomach, while leaving the rest of the body behind. However, as the scientists examined the data more closely, inconsistencies began to emerge. The temperature recorded by the tag, 78 degrees Fahrenheit, was much lower than the body temperature typically observed in orcas, which are known to maintain a core temperature of around 96.8 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. If an orca had swallowed the shark or the tracking device, the temperature recorded by the tag would have been much higher. Additionally, the rapid descent recorded by the tag was inconsistent with orca behavior. While orcas are capable of diving to great depths, their dives are typically slow and deliberate. The data suggested something much faster, more abrupt, a sudden plunge that seemed more characteristic of a shark's movements. There was also the issue of the shark's disappearance. Orcas, while capable of removing specific internal organs from their prey, rarely consume the entire shark. In fact, most orca attacks on sharks involve dismemberment, with the shark's liver and other internal organs being removed, while the rest of the body is discarded. In the case of the great white shark in question, no remains were found. No liverless carcass washed up on the shore. No evidence of a prolonged struggle. The tracking device had recorded the shark's final moments, and it seemed as though the shark had been swallowed whole, with no signs of a fight or struggle. This was not typical orca behavior. The inconsistencies between the orca theory and the data collected from the tag prompted researchers to reconsider their hypothesis. While orcas were undoubtedly capable of killing great white sharks, the data from the 2003 event didn't match the known patterns of orca predation. The temperature, the dive patterns, and the absence of a dismembered shark carcass suggested that the predator responsible for the shark's disappearance might not have been an orca after all. It was clear that something had consumed the shark. The question was, what? Theories about a new, previously unknown predator, as well as the possibility of a giant cannibalistic great white shark, began to gain more traction. But for now, the mystery remained unsolved. The data collected from the tracking device continued to point to a predator capable of overpowering and consuming a great white shark, but the identity of that predator was still a mystery. As researchers continued to investigate, one thing was certain: the ocean held more secrets than anyone had ever imagined. As the investigation progressed, the theories began to multiply, but the more the scientists examined the data, the more the puzzle seemed to become more complicated. With the orca hypothesis now looking less plausible, researchers returned to the most straightforward and potentially terrifying possibility that the predator responsible for the shark's disappearance was another great white shark, but one much larger and more powerful than the one that had been tagged. The possibility of cannibalism among sharks, though rare, was not as outlandish as it had once seemed. In fact, shark-on-shark predation, though not often witnessed, had been documented before, and it wasn't restricted to only the most extreme cases. The more the team studied the data, the clearer it became that a larger great white shark might have been responsible for eating the smaller one. The pattern of movement recorded by the tracking device seemed to match that of a large predator, one that was capable of diving to great depths and navigating the ocean with remarkable efficiency. But the question remained: just how large would this shark need to be to overpower and devour a 9-foot great white? Scientists began to look at the potential size of the predator. A shark capable of swallowing a 9-foot great white whole would have to be incredibly large, at least 16 feet long, and possibly much larger. This wasn't an entirely unfathomable size. Great white sharks can grow to be more than 20 feet in length, though most are smaller. A 16 to 20 foot great white would be far more than a match for a 9-foot shark. The size disparity alone would make a successful ambush far easier for the larger predator. But size alone wasn't the only factor. Great whites are known to be solitary hunters, and territoriality often plays a key role in their behavior. Large sharks may sometimes prey on smaller ones, not just for food, but to establish dominance over a certain area. The shark in question may have been ambushed, not for a meal, but as part of a territorial dispute, or to assert dominance over its feeding grounds. This type of behavior would explain the swift and efficient nature of the attack, with the larger shark overpowering the smaller one before it had a chance to escape or put up any significant resistance. The data from the tag also suggested that the predator had consumed the shark entirely, leaving no trace behind. This was unusual. In most cases of shark predation, at least some part of the prey would be left behind. particularly if the predator was scavenging or feeding opportunistically. However, in this instance, there were no remains found, not even a piece of the shark's carcass. The absence of any remains after such a large animal had disappeared seemed to indicate that the predator had swallowed the shark whole. This kind of behavior was seen in some other predatory animals, but it was rare and certainly not typical of the great white shark. The temperature readings provided by the tracking device added another clue. The recorded rise in temperature from the usual 46 degrees Fahrenheit to 78 degrees Fahrenheit was far higher than anything normally seen in the depths of the ocean where great white sharks usually reside. This temperature was more consistent with the internal body temperature of a warm-blooded predator. This was another factor that pointed to a larger great white shark being the culprit. Unlike many other fish, great white sharks are capable of regulating the temperature of certain parts of their bodies, including their stomach and brain. This ability, known as regional endothermy, allows them to stay active in colder waters and helps with digestion. The data from the tag suggested that the shark had been ingested by a warm-blooded animal, one whose internal body temperature closely matched the expected temperature range for a large great white shark. When the researchers compared the movement patterns recorded by the tag with those from other large sharks, they found that the behavior of the unknown predator was consistent with that of a much larger great white shark. In particular, the shark's slow, deliberate dives and ascents were strikingly similar to those of other large great whites previously tagged and studied by marine biologists. These comparisons gave further weight to the theory that a massive great white shark had been the predator responsible for the shark's disappearance. The evidence pointing to another great white shark was compelling, but it raised a chilling question: if one great white shark could be eaten by another, just how many more instances of shark cannibalism could be occurring in the vast unexplored depths of the ocean? If a 9-foot shark could vanish so completely, what other hidden dangers might lurk beneath the surface, waiting to claim the next unsuspecting predator? This thought began to haunt researchers as they delved deeper into the mystery of the 2003 event. One theory that began to gain traction was that large dominant sharks might engage in cannibalistic when they are particularly hungry or when they are establishing control over their territory. The large size of the predator in this case suggested that it had not been a routine hunt for food. Instead, it seemed more likely that the predator had attacked and consumed the smaller shark to assert its dominance. This would explain why there were no signs of a struggle, and why the shark seemed to vanish so suddenly and efficiently. In the world of great white sharks, size and strength often dictate who controls a particular area. In cases where a larger shark dominates a feeding ground, it might see a smaller shark as a threat to its territory, and act decisively to eliminate it. This theory seemed to fit the available data perfectly. The temperature spike, the deep dive, and the lack of remains all pointed toward a larger, more aggressive predator, asserting its dominance. This wasn't the first time such behavior had been observed in the animal kingdom. Many species of predators are known to engage in similar actions to maintain control over their territory. Whether it's wolves, lions, or even birds of prey, dominance is often established through aggressive behavior, including predation. The idea that a massive great white shark could engage in similar behavior was not as far-fetched as it might have once seemed. As the investigation continued, the idea of shark-on-shark predation gained more credibility. The evidence supporting the cannibalism theory was becoming overwhelming. But there was still one more question that remained unanswered. How many other instances of shark cannibalism might be occurring that had gone unnoticed? Could there be larger, more powerful great white sharks patrolling the deep, invisible to human eyes but playing a crucial role in regulating the ocean's food chain? In the years following the 2003 incident, marine biologists began to notice strange patterns in the data from other tagged sharks. Similar anomalies, rapid temperature changes, sudden dives, and unexplained disappearances began to surface. These incidents raised suspicions that shark cannibalism might be more common than scientists had previously believed. While the 2003 case remained the most documented instance of such behavior, researchers were starting to see signs that large sharks, perhaps even some that were much larger than previously recorded, were engaging in this type of predation more often than anyone had anticipated. The more the scientists examined the data, the more it became clear that there was a hidden world of shark behavior just below the surface. The ocean, it seemed, was full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered, and the story of the great white shark's disappearance had only scratched the surface of what could be a much larger and more unsettling truth. If a massive cannibalistic great white could exist in the depths, unseen by human eyes, what other secrets might the ocean be hiding? As the investigation into the 2003 event continued, it was clear that scientists were beginning to view the great white shark in a new light. No longer was it simply the ocean's apex predator. Instead, it had become a species capable of being both predator and prey, and the lines between dominance and survival had become even more blurred. The hunt for answers was far from over, but the story of the missing shark had already begun to reshape our understanding of the ocean's most fearsome hunter. As the theory of a larger great white shark preying on a smaller one began to gain more traction, researchers started to re-examine the data with a renewed sense of urgency. The possibility of cannibalism among great white sharks, once considered an anomaly, now seemed increasingly plausible. However, it was the implications of this discovery that truly began to stir the scientific community. If a great white shark could be eaten by another of its kind, what did this mean for the hierarchy of ocean predators? Was the great white still the undisputed ruler of the ocean, or could there be other creatures, perhaps even other great whites, that could challenge its position at the top of the food chain? The idea of large dominant great white sharks hunting and preying on smaller individuals raised unsettling questions about the true nature of shark behavior. Cannibalism, though not unheard of in the animal kingdom, is still a rare and often misunderstood phenomenon. In many species, including sharks, the survival of the fittest mentality prevails, and the strongest individuals often dominate the others. In some cases, this leads to predation, where the largest and most powerful animals eliminate weaker members of their own species. This, it seemed, was the likely scenario in the 2003, where the predator responsible for consuming the smaller shark was likely not just any great white, but a much larger and more dominant one. But just how large would this predator need to be? Experts began to estimate that the shark responsible for the attack would have to be at least 16 feet long, and possibly even larger. While great white sharks of this size are rare, they do exist, and some individuals have been recorded at lengths approaching 20 feet. These colossal sharks are capable of inflicting devastating damage, and their sheer size gives them a clear advantage over smaller sharks. In the case of the 9-foot great white, it's easy to imagine how a much larger shark could ambush it and overpower it in a matter of seconds. The absence of any signs of a struggle, no blood, no torn carcass, and no remains left behind, was consistent with the idea that the predator had attacked with such speed and precision that the smaller shark had no chance to fight back. The data provided by the tracking device continued to support this theory. The sudden temperature spike, followed by the deep dive, suggested that the predator had consumed the shark in one swift motion. The fact that the tracking device continued to transmit data for several days after the event only further reinforced this idea. It seemed that the larger shark had consumed the smaller one, then dived deep into the ocean to digest its meal undisturbed. The lack of any other clues, such as pieces of the shark's body or evidence of a struggle, pointed to a clean, almost surgical disappearance. It was as if the smaller shark had been taken without a trace, swallowed whole by a predator that was simply too powerful and too efficient to leave any evidence behind. This discovery was not just a shock to marine biologists. It was a revelation that would reshape the way scientists thought about the food chain in the ocean. If a 9-foot shark could be consumed by another larger shark, what did this mean for the other creatures that shared the same waters? Could there be even larger sharks lurking in the deep, hidden from human eyes, capable of preying on their smaller counterparts? This question began to haunt researchers, and they began to look for similar cases of shark-on-shark predation. What they found was both disturbing and fascinating. In the years following the 2003 event, marine biologists began to notice a pattern. Other tagged sharks had disappeared under similar circumstances, with their tracking devices showing sudden drops in temperature and rapid dives to great depths. While not all of these cases could be confirmed as shark-on-shark predation, the similarities between them were striking. It seemed that in certain regions of the ocean, large dominant sharks were engaging in a form of predation that had previously been thought to be rare, if not impossible. The idea that a great white shark could be both predator and prey was no longer confined to the realm of speculation. It was becoming a reality that marine biologists were beginning to take seriously. As researchers continued to investigate these mysterious disappearances, they began to uncover more evidence of large sharks enforcing their dominance over smaller ones. This behavior, once considered a rare anomaly, was now seen as an important piece of the puzzle in understanding how sharks interact with one another in the wild. It became clear that size and strength were not the only factors determining the hierarchy of ocean predators. In some cases, sheer aggression and territoriality were just as important in determining who controlled the waters. This revelation began to challenge long-held assumptions about shark behavior. For years, great white sharks had been viewed as the undisputed kings of the ocean, with few natural enemies capable of posing a serious threat to them. But now, it seemed that even the great white might be vulnerable, at least to other sharks that were larger, more aggressive, and more dominant. This realization forced scientists to reconsider their understanding of the marine food chain. If large great white sharks were capable of preying on smaller ones, what other surprises might the ocean be hiding? One of the most unsettling aspects of this discovery was the possibility that these giant, cannibalistic sharks could be living in the deep, far from human observation. The ocean is vast, and much of it remains unexplored. Some scientists believe that large, elusive sharks may inhabit remote, deep-water feeding grounds, avoiding human contact altogether. These sharks would be well outside the reach of traditional research methods, and their existence would remain largely unknown. If these sharks were truly capable of consuming smaller great whites, then the ocean's food chain was more complex and more brutal than anyone had realized. Further evidence of this hidden world began to emerge in the form of rare shark carcasses found washed ashore. Some of these carcasses showed signs of massive bite marks, with the size and depth of the bites suggesting that the predator responsible was far larger than any known great white shark. These findings, though limited, provided further evidence that shark-on-shark predation was not as rare as previously believed. It seemed that the larger sharks were enforcing a kind of natural hierarchy to oceans, one that remained largely unseen by the public eye. As the investigation into the 2003 disappearance continued, it became clear that that was not an isolated incident. Instead, it was part of a larger, more complex pattern of shark behavior that was only just beginning to be understood. The idea that sharks, even great white sharks, could engage in cannibalistic behavior and prey on each other was no longer a fringe theory. It was a reality that scientists had to confront, one that would change the way we viewed these magnificent and often misunderstood creatures. In the end, the 2003 disappearance of the tagged great white shark was not just a biological mystery. It was a turning point in the study of marine predators. The event challenged long-held assumptions about the ocean's top predators and revealed a hidden world of shark behavior that was more brutal and more complex than anyone had imagined. The idea of a giant, cannibalistic shark lurking in the deep and asserting its dominance over smaller sharks was both terrifying and fascinating. It raised questions about the true nature of the marine food chain and the secretive, unseen world that lies beneath the surface of the ocean.